Well, I got it.
Live on YouTube.
All right, welcome back, everybody. House Energy and Digital Infrastructure on Wednesday, April 30th. And we're continuing to take testimony on H181, an act about residential and commercial building energy standards. And we're here with the Division of Fire Safety at DPS. So we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves and then turn it over to you for the record. My name's Kathleen James from Manchester.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington. Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Derek Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Forrest Elliott, Wyndham 2.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
And Scott Campbell, representative from St. Johnsbury.
Great. And in the room?
Andrew Brewer from DRM on behalf of the builders and the architects.
Great.
And Allison Despathy, Danville resident.
All righty. For the record.
I am Michael DeRocha, the Executive Director for the Division of Fire Safety. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to come here and speak. And I think if the committee's okay, I can go through my written testimony. There's probably a few typos in there, sorry, but I've been traveling back from Florida, and so I couldn't put this out any sooner. So I was working on this last minute, and to get this out to the committee. So
Thanks for doing that.
my apologies. So just a little bit of background here. I've been with the Division of Fire Safety for nearly 35 years. And in our division, we do a lot of stuff outside code enforcement. I'm responsible for fire service training, urban search and rescue, hazardous material response, fire investigation, construction permitting across the entire state, licensing of 12 or 13 trade professions. We also have the electrical licensing board, the plumbing licensing board, the handicap accessibility board, and elevator safety board. And we promulgate rules for all those boards, and we promulgate rules for the Division of Fire Safety's adoption of the Building Life Safety Code. So I thought I would just give kind of a high level overview of the amount of work that we have here in our division. I know we're kind of in an awkward place because most of the summer study groups that have been focused on energy efficiency implies that the Division of Fire Safety should be this authority having jurisdiction, which is then I know it's been a key focus. So I just wanted to start off with actually trying to explain what the authority having jurisdiction actually means. So in my written testimony, I provided that the authority having jurisdiction is defined as an organization or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of the codes and standards, including the approval of equipment, materials, installations, and procedures. The AHJ can be an individual, could be county government, a municipality, a fire chief, building department, governmental agency. You can have multiple AHJs residing over projects. So if you have a local resident that is applying for a building permit in town, and we have no jurisdiction over that, then the building department is the authority having jurisdiction over those legal the issuance of those codes or standards or zoning administration aspects. So the authority having jurisdiction across the country varies greatly. You can have county government running building departments. You can have individual towns that have like an AHJ that runs the programs. New Hampshire, for example, I think you'll find each municipality has their own building official. So you have to deal with the county. Here in Vermont, I think we're fortunate that we have one place, and that's the Division of Fire Safety. It's not done in every single county. So architects and engineers deal with one entity, not a wide range of constituents. But with that said, this, let's see here. The Division of Fire Safety, the reason why we've been opposing being named authority having jurisdiction, I've provided a number of bullet points here. But the division does not have the bandwidth or the resources to manage the energy efficiency program. Contributing to this is the lack of trained employees, inadequate funding, the expansion of our statutory authority also into single-family owner-occupied homes. We have been opposing expanding our authority into single-family owner-occupied homes for a number of years. Last year, I submitted a budget to the working group. It was approximately $1.5 million annually if we were going to be appointed the AHJ and enforce energy efficiency codes. That would be hiring people that are trained to do energy efficiency inspections and that type of stuff in the buildings that we regulate. That $1.5 million was a conservative estimate, but it gave a breakdown of employees, their pay, equipment, that kind of stuff. My position has been, what the problem is you could put all the regulation you want into this energy efficiency, but if you don't have the trained contractors that can do this work, it doesn't do any good to put all these regulations in place. My position on the work group study for a couple of years has been focused on, let's get the contractors trained, get the contractors educated, do it through either incentives or through a voluntary process, and develop the workforce from the ground up. And then if you want to somehow add additional regulation onto that process, it's much easier because you have the workforce that can do this work. One of the issues here is you see the CVs have a higher compliance rate. That's because you have design professionals and you have a more skillful workforce dealing with the commercial building energy code, which is referred to as the CVs. The reason you don't on the residential side is because, one, you don't have the professionals like you do on the commercial side, but also you don't have the trained and educated workforce in the residential side like you do on the commercial side. So that is some of your disparity, in my opinion, between a lower compliance rate with your residential construction versus the commercial, between the RVs and the CVs.
Could I jump in 1 second with a question?
Yeah, oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Rep Campbell?
Thank you. Mike, first of all, thank you for coming in to testify. It's always great to see you. Wish I was there. So you just mentioned the difference between compliance in commercial versus residential. And it seems to me one of the key differences in those two realms is that in commercial construction, we have not only professionals, but licensed professionals. And of course, they risk their licenses if they don't comply with codes. That's one of the key mechanisms for ensuring quality and competence and quality in the construction. Leads me to wonder whether you would suggest, or I don't know, how you would feel, I guess, about licensing residential contractors. Right now, we have a registration process, but no licensing in the sort of colloquial sense. There's no credential or competency test in order to be registered as a builder in Vermont. How do you feel about licensing?
I mean, I personally would not support licensing per se of contractors. I think that you can do this voluntarily through registration. I don't think you need to build that whole layer of licensing. This is my opinion. I think with all the programs that we manage and run, having people that can do the work, is extremely important, right? You can't be at every job site inspecting every single person's work. All our gas technicians that are out and about, they do work. We're not there to inspect all their work. And
But they're licensed as well, right? They have a license from DFS.
they're certified, they're not licensed. And
Okay. All
you
right.
know, being licensed is a higher level than somebody being registered. So, you know, my opinion has always been, why aren't we just educating and developing the workforce, getting these folks trained so that they know how to build energy efficiency homes, and have them voluntarily register through OPR, and then they can be, I think the state could develop a energy efficiency program where contractors can voluntarily be trained on how to build energy efficiency homes. There's a lot less complexity in constructing a 1 or 2 family dwelling or a single family home versus a multi-story residential apartment building consisting of 50, 60 units. There's just, the complexity is so much different. And that's why 26 VSA under the architectural licensing laws exempts architects stamps on plans for single family homes, 1 and 2 family dwellings, 3 unit dwellings, and I think up to 4 units. Architects do not have to stamp those drawings. So if somebody submits a permit application to us for a duplex, we do not require an architectural stamp on those drawings. So the complexity is just not there. The other issue is the current energy efficiency standards adopted by the Public Service Department are the 2024 standards. We are just getting prepared to file rules to adopt the 2021 IBC, which is the International Building Code, and the NFPA Life Safety Code and those relevant standards. So we are already 1 complete code cycle behind public service in adopting the rules. So our rules are not in alignment with the Public Service Department. Yeah. Additionally, there's been a lot of discussion about the Division of Fire Safety adopting the International Residential Building Code. So I just wanted to provide some clarification on this for the group. The Division of Fire Safety does have a building code for any construction 3 units and up. So the only occupancies that we are lacking a building code is for 1 and 2 family dwellings, so up to a duplex. However, we do require structural engineering drawings for the truss and the floor assemblies, and we use the Life Safety Code, and we also use the Vermont Fire and Building Safety Code. So it's not like there's no regulation on the construction of duplexes. We just don't adopt the International Residential Code. The IRC has energy efficiency standards embedded in that code. Those codes conflict with the RVs that are adopted by the Public Service Department. So there's energy efficiency standards within the IRC. They are not in alignment with the Public Service Department's RVs. Part of that reason is because the Public Service Department amends the RV code and they add additional requirements into that particular document. So I have an IRC work group that I established, and although I will take responsibility for not meeting as frequent as I would like to be because of my workload, but we are meeting on Friday, May 9th, to basically reset this work group to explore what would it look like for the Division of Fire Safety to adopt the IRC. There's a lot of stuff in the IRC that has to be vetted before we adopt that standard. That particular standard requires plans to be submitted to the authority having jurisdiction by a design professional. Well, I interpret that as being an architect, right? What is a design professional? Well, we look at it as an architect. Well, 26 VSA says you can't require a stamp on 1 and 2 family dwellings. So there are statutory issues that would have to be worked out, even if we wanted to adopt the IRC. I also have concerns about whether our contractor pool can even comply with the provisions and interpret the IRC. The IRC is a document about this thick, and we would have to provide a very extensive amount of training to our contractors in order to interpret and apply that particular standard to the residential construction environment on 1 and 2 family dwellings. There's also a residential sprinkler system requirement in the IRC. We would have to look at that and evaluate that. I have concerns about what this would do to our permit process as far as is this going to delay issuing permits. And I would just say that that's a major issue, even on the commercial energy side of it, is regulating all this energy efficiency stuff that we have no expertise or knowledge on. How is that going to impact my issuance of construction permits? We review about $700 million worth of construction valuation annually in the Division of Fire Safety, 2,500 building permits roughly. And, you know, how is that going to impact the issuance of our building permits? And then we also have concerns about affordability, right? What is this going to cost? When we file rules, I file financial impact statements. What is the affordability cost? And I know there's been great discussions in the work group about, you know, whether you may pay more upfront, but then at the end of the day, you may see the cost savings on the back end, right? You're creating energy efficiency homes. I'm not sure what that pans out to be, but that's a concern that we also have. Sorry if I'm jumping around on this.
That's okay.
Let's see. One of the big concerns I have here is which I've already mentioned, is the expansion of our jurisdiction into single family owner occupied homes. The budget that I submitted does not take into consideration single family owner occupied homes. I have basically agreed to look at the feasibility of taking energy compliance certificates that are now required to be posted in the buildings and in the utility rooms. I have offered to, if it's a word, electronify that process, meaning that we would look at being able to accept those compliance certificates electronically, store them at the Division of Fire Safety rather than having them physically posted on job sites. The challenge there is under 30 VSA, that requires a statutory change as well, because in Title 30, the posting of these documents by Public Service Department statutory requirements requires them in utility rooms. So there's some statutory changes that would need to take place there, even to do something as simple as getting these compliance certificates submitted to us. And on that end, part of the residential compliance or enhancements to the RVs, my opinion was that why don't we do a compliance certificate that is geared and constructed so that builders and contractors use that compliance certificate as a guideline, almost like a self-inspection checklist, use it as a guideline. So when they sign that compliance certificate and they submit it, they're attesting to compliance, whatever the requirements are on that particular compliance certificate. So that's, I have brought that up at a couple of the work group meetings. I just see some value with that. You know, if you're going to sign a compliance certificate and send it in, why not have that compliance certificate steer the people that are signing this in the direction of building compliant homes. So that's just a quick rundown of this. If I sounded a little scattered, it's just a lot. There's a lot here.
I have a question. So the $1.5 million estimated budget, that would be for, I guess, oversight or code management of the residential energy building codes.
This would cover, good question, that would cover the CVs and the RVs.
Okay.
And what that would do is, it would allow us to staff our 4 district offices with energy efficiency specialists. In my budget I presented to the work group, I included the actual job class, their salaries with benefits and all that. And those individuals would have to be hired, they'd have to be trained, they would have to be embedded into our workflow for the plan review aspects of what we do with the construction documents, right? So that's where my concern is. What does that do with our issuance of building permits, right? We're going to add another whole new process into this. And then in the years that I've been doing this, I use the word code management because you have to manage variances, right? We get variants submitted before a building is built. People don't want to do a particular item, or they want to offer equivalencies, alternatives, and we have to manage variances into the issuance of building permits. Right now, we're running about 95% of our permits are issued within 30 days. That's what we strive to do. And we have an average turnaround time of roughly 15 days on our permits. We have a very short construction period here. Any delays, additional delays in our permit process is going to cost people a lot of money. So my position is the less bureaucracy that I can put into this process. And I'm not against energy efficiency. I want to emphasize that. I've worked with the group and trying to maneuver through this to where we can have contractors that have the knowledge and can go out there and construct compliant homes. And the other issue is that you got to submit these compliance certificates. I think if we can move to an online submittal process, I think we can have a better check and balance on getting more of these compliance certificates posted. And the reason being that some of these certificates are not always posted. We have a lot of phased in projects where we grant occupancy for a portion of a building. Say the first floor of a 3-story building is done and they're moving up to the 2nd floor. We let them occupy the 1st floor. Well, that energy compliance certificate's not posted until the entire project is done. So they're, the statutory language is not perfect either. I guess is what I'm trying to say on that.
Rep Campbell?
Yeah, I was trying to find the documents that you had, given the working group last year, Mike, and I can't seem to locate them off the top of my head, but, I wanted to ask a clarification on that. So that 1.5 million, did not include single family owner occupied, right? It was just all other residential construction.
Correct.
Yeah. And do you have any sense of what the volume, you said $700 million worth of, I guess, commercial construction that you typically see in a year? Do you have any sense of the dollar volume of what this other additional piece of work would cover? Do you
No.
understand what I'm asking?
No, I'm sorry, sir. I don't have that information. I don't know what the volume of single family owner occupied homes are. And then my understanding is some of these compliance certificates might be required, like if you did major renovations or you did alterations too. I'm not sure how that would be policed or how that would be, I mean, that's another whole.
Well, so my point was that I don't know, it's got to be certainly, I don't know, tens of millions, maybe $100 million. I don't know. So supporting a code management regime at DFS, even though it sounds like $1.5 million, maybe $2 million sounds like a lot of money, it might not be that much money in proportion to the volume of work that we're seeing get done. So I was just trying to get a sense of that. Okay, that's all I have for right this second. Thanks.
Sorry.
Rep Kleppner?
We've heard a few times from a few different people that it really doesn't make sense to have an energy code without a statewide building code. What's your opinion on that point of view?
I think I don't think it matters. I mean, we have the IBC for 3 units and above. So we do have a building code for all those buildings. The problem is right now we will be under the 21 IBC when Public Service Department is under the 2024 IBC. And when you change and make amendments to the energy code, which Vermont does, then if you really want to get technical and into the weeds, you start getting into, well, what does that mean to the listing of your exterior wall construction, your floor ceiling assemblies and buildings? All those have to have like UL listings. And the complexity of not having the codes align. There's language in the Public Service Department rules that default conflicts between the energy code and the building codes to the Division of Fire Safety. It's the only way we could fix that is by having public service say in their rules that if there's a conflict, that it reverts back to the Division of Fire Safety's building code. So we manage that on our end. So I don't like on 1 and 2 family dwellings. I mean, if you have energy codes and you have contractors that understand the energy code, I think what you're diving into is more of a building science issue, more so than you are whether you can have an energy efficiency program. I think we need contractors that can be educated and trained. And to your point, sir, building science would be an element of this training.
Rep Powell?
I think I reviewed the RB, and it said, when it referred to the RRC, that it said the more stringent interpretation of the 2 codes prevailed. But that's the end of that statement. That was a statement. I have a question. Would it be proper to say we've adopted the International Building Code, but we only enforce it for 3 units and above?
That's correct.
So that the code adoption, if the problem is the money changes hands in the court. So you need, in order to settle, it's a legal action if somebody puts in an undersized joist and not necessarily, I mean, if I ask around a room of people, what's the difference between a grade 2 or a grade 1 2x4? I don't think the common customer would know. And so that, I guess that, so the statement that we've adopted a building code, we don't maybe it's not enforced, we don't inspect the building code for the.
Correct. And the reason being is the IBC and its applicability does not apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings. So that particular building code does not apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings under the applicability of that standard of that building code. So it can't be used on the 1 and 2 family dwellings. It is a multi-family residential and commercial building code. The IRC is specific in its applicability to 1 and 2 family dwellings. And what I'm trying to say is there needs to be a very deliberate training and educational type of curriculum designed for contractors if you're going to adopt the IRC. You can't just adopt it and then, have energy efficiency standards in that IRC that conflict with the public service department's rules. So that is something that this IRC group that I have working on this, that'll be one of the charges, is how do we wash out all those inconsistencies and if we're going to move in that direction. I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm saying there's some work that needs to be done before we jump into this IRC and say Vermont's got to do this. Because it's gonna, if we don't do it right, we're gonna set out to fail on this right out of the gate. It's not gonna be good. We need to have this workforce prepared and trained and educated to take on that responsibility. Yeah.
To that point, I will say we have taken testimony suggesting that if we do go to a residential building code for 1 and 2 family homes, that the code be clear and the software be set sort of 12 months before it comes into effect, to give all of the builders and contractors time to understand the new rules and get training that they need and so forth. I'll also say that a number of people have suggested that your shop is the right place for building inspection as well as energy, as well as fire. And I think it's partially your fault, because everyone is universally in admiration of the work that you and your team do. And those guys are great. They know what they're doing. They're competent, and they go into the houses anyway. And just, it's the most natural place for the designated authority to go, unless we build a whole new one.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement with, from the logical perspective, right? It makes sense. I would never say that doesn't make sense, because it does. We already do the plan reviews and so forth. What I'm doing is trying to emphasize that it's not just like turning a light switch on and saying, here, the Division of Fire Safety, you're going to be the AHJ. What I'm trying to do is, in my years of experience, to say this is not an easy undertaking. It's not an inexpensive undertaking. It's got major complexity, requires major statutory modifications, and then you have the whole, there's philosophy on the back end of it. Are we going to exert state jurisdiction over single family owner occupied homes, which a lot of people within this work group want us to do. And so, but I agree with you, sir, that it is a logical fit. I wouldn't argue that.
Brooke Bailey.
Yeah, we heard in one of our testimonies that the 2024 RVs that the department's ready to, or is already accepted. There may be issues with some of those compliances because they haven't been tried and true yet. And do you think there should be a lag, like you're saying you're doing 2021 now, that to see if these newer, whatever these new methods are workable? I mean, they may be proposing something that may cause other problems down the road and they haven't been figured out yet. So you think there should be a delay in that?
I wish I could speak to that, but I don't have enough technical knowledge to answer that question. I would say this: when the energy efficiency codes first started really coming into play, especially in weatherization, and this is not a shot at energy efficiency or weatherization or anybody, but when we were tightening up these homes, we were having a rash of carbon monoxide issues because a lot of the combustion air intakes and stuff like this, the heating appliances were being shut off for the sake of energy efficiency. So I think when you look at the sealing up homes and making them very tight, which is fine for the energy efficiency stuff, sometimes I think you need to look at the safety aspect as well. And and in response to that, we got into certifying heat technicians, and we got into carbon monoxide alarms, with the legislature was very supportive of. So that's a good question. I don't have the technical knowledge to answer that, but I know there's been a lot of comments made that the contractors are struggling to comply, to learn and understand all the energy efficiency stuff. It's not just in Vermont, it's nationally, it's across the country. And so, I think we're just missing a big training component and an educational component where we keep amending these codes every 3 years. You got to keep up with the training of the workforce to keep up with all these modifications, and I'm not sure we've been able to do that effectively.
Rep. Sibilia.
Thanks, Director Wiltshire. What type of, I think about this training happening in Chittenden County, where we have a lot of contractors. It's easy for, folks to come to maybe a half day or a couple hour training session. And then other rural parts of the state. What successes have you had mitigating the difficulty for more sparsely training contractors in more sparsely populated parts of the state?
We have relied heavily on at least the major trade professions that we regulate. We rely heavily on third-party national certification folks. So, for example, propane, we rely on a national propane certification entity where they submit the paperwork to us and we can then certify them. What I pitched to the work group was, in some conversations, some of them are side conversations, is to develop a tier approach to energy efficiency certification. You could have somebody that is, like, just an example, tier 1. They can install windows, insulation, siding. Okay, that person has specific training to do those jobs. Then you have a tier 2 level. Well, maybe they get into lighting, this kind of stuff, and you set up a certification program or a licensing, or not licensing, but a training program where somebody with a tier 2 registration can do all the windows, insulation, siding, that kind of stuff. And you build this ladder of professional development that enables contractors to choose a level entry, and then you can build their professional development up,
Mhm.
and do it through incentives and entice these people to come and do this work and learn it. That has kind of been my pitch is, to try to get students, even start them in high school in the VOTEC programs, right? Have them start there with getting some of this, energy efficiency training. I totally support training. In fact, I had applied for a $1.4 million grant through FEMA. It was awarded to us, but the recent administration canceled the funding, so I lost that 1.4 million. I had set 400,000 of that aside for energy efficiency training, so that we could support entities that were going to roll out energy efficiency training. So we did try to be a partner in promoting this training and this awareness for energy efficiency. I don't think contractors want to go out and do a bad job. They just don't know how to do it. And then, you made a good statement. Learning what a floor joist is and what it should be and how thick it should be and all this stuff for spans and all this. We need to train our contractors so that they know how to build a code compliant deck. You can put all the regulation you want, but if they don't know how to do it, that's kind of where we are. But on the 1 and 2 family dwellings, we see mostly consumer type complaints that we get. Somebody didn't complete what they said they were gonna, and we paid them for the whole project. We do see some shabby work. I'll just be honest with you, but we've also had building collapses, roof collapses with structural engineers that have signed off on projects. So, it's a wide range of issues.
Yeah, Rector.
So it sounds like you're not closing the door to the idea of having an IRC,
Correct.
but you have a desire to see the training really optimized first in order
Correct.
to most successfully do that. And then is the working group tasked with doing any kind of a study on what the cost would be and all of that? Has that?
They will be on Friday,
Okay,
next Friday.
so
I
then
mean,
you'll
we
have
have
a
to do yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Have to do a little bit of a reset on that. Just been overwhelmed with work, so I put the IRC study group kind of on a back burner, so I take full responsibility for that. But I know that it's a priority, and I know a lot of people want to be engaged in that conversation. We have a pretty good group of folks. So I'm not saying we won't adopt it, but if we do, there's definitely a thorough analysis that needs to take place before we dot our I's.
So I just like to say that Mike has been terrifically constructive in the working group about how we can increase compliance, and I think all of us are in complete agreement that training is and education is what we're after. We're not looking for ways to penalize people. We're looking for ways to help people improve the work that they're doing and understand the whole dynamics of sort of moisture flow and energy flow and all that stuff. I would just point out that it is useful to have a document or a standard for construction on the building code side to refer to. So what the architects who have been involved in the working group call a standard of care, so that and then that becomes the basis for training programs for contractors. So adopting the IRC doesn't have to wait until we train contractors on the IRC. It could be done and then form the sort of foundation or the baseline for what to train contractors to, it seems to me. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sorry, sir.
I'm not going to get you to say yes on my mic.
Well, no, I'm thinking you gotta have a document. Even if you can't just arbitrarily take the IRC, put it in the annex of our rules and say, hey, this is a standard of care, when there's all kinds of conflicts that exist in that particular standard. So if we're gonna put something as a standard of care, we would want to vet that standard and make sure that those conflicts are resolved.
Sure. Right.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. The other thing that occurred to me as you were talking earlier was it seems to me that it makes sense that updates to the RBs and CBs would coincide with updates to the IBC and the IRC if we adopt the IRC, so that those code cycles would be in sync. Last year, or I think it was last year, the bill that set up the working group also included removing the requirement that Public Service Department update the RBs and CBs in sync with the IECC, that is with the International Energy Code Council updates to the Energy Code, which is how we wound up with an energy code that is 2023 or 2024, and meanwhile we have building codes that are 2015 currently, right? So it would make sense to me that we would think about aligning the building codes with the energy codes in terms of update cycle.
And just one more piece. Sorry, not only do we adopt the IBC, the building code, but we also adopt the National Fire Protection Association standards. Primarily, the model code there is the Life Safety Code, which is NFPA 101. And that particular standard is used for all existing and new buildings under construction. So we marry those standards with the IBC to the best of our ability by using a matrix in our rules on when a design professional uses either the IBC or the NFPA codes. And the reason we use the NFPA code is because that code has been designed and built under multiple fire fatalities. So if you have more than 3 deaths in a fire, these standards that are within the life safety code have been developed from lessons learned on multiple fire fatality fires over the past 30, 40 years. That particular standard says you're going to have a fire in your home. What are we going to do to protect you and get you out? That's the fundamental concept of that standard. It's worked very well for us.
Right. Great. Okay. Yeah. One more.
A few years ago, the local town health officer was relieved of, maybe it was fire alarm wiring, reverted to the department, the electrical inspector or whatever. Did that require your department to add staffing to the?
Last year, we through legislation, we were given authority to manage the rental housing health and safety code. And we were allotted 4 positions. These 4 positions took over 222 health officers roughly we're doing. So we now respond to all rental housing health complaints, which is roughly about 600. We've only been doing this program since January 1st of 2024. And so we hired 4 positions, but to answer your question on those complaints, if there are electrical issues, then we can bring in our electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors, but we have 4 designated housing inspectors now, and we are very challenged with that. I forgot we promulgate rules for that program as well too.
But that's only after the receiving of a complaint.
Correct.
It's not
Yes, sir.
when a sign goes up that somebody's renting their
No,
in-law apartment for rent that a occupancy permit needs to be issued.
no, this is all complaint based.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your written testimony. We will